crop inputs is likely to go up considerably for 2022 as well. A lot of estimates are saying that farmers are going to pay 30 to 50% or more for fertilizer costs to raise corn in 2022 compared to what they did in 21. And seed costs have gone up, fuel costs, obviously the cost of repairs and labor. So a lot of those costs went up considerably. And I know I've run some numbers that a year ago where farmers were, for 2021, we're probably looking at $3.80 to $4 a bushel for a break-even price for corn. They're probably going to be looking at $4.50 to $4.75 a bushel for 2022.
That's Kent Tesey with Minstar Bank in Lake Crystal, Minnesota. I'm Mark Dorenkamp with Managing for Profit on Brownfield.
On August 13th, 2021, Alpha 3E Licensee LLC, licensee of KVFD 1400 Fort Dodge, filed an application with the Federal Communications Commission for the transfer of control of Alpha 3E Licensee LLC from the current shareholders of Alpha Media Holdings, Inc. to the new shareholders of Alpha Media Holdings, Inc. Members of the public wishing to view this application or obtain information about how to file comments and petitions on the application can visit publicfiles.fcc.gov and search in KVFD's public file.
Blue Ribbon, Pelham Waters, your water pro since 1949.
Do you have questions about your water? What is a whole home filter? Is my softener working or not? Can I get rid of that red stain around the sink? I'm Brian with Blue Ribbon Pelham Waters. We're here to fix problem water. We'll work with you to find the right solution for you. We've been serving the Fort Dodge area since 1949. Let us serve your water treatment needs. Sales, service, rentals. Blue Ribbon Pelham Waters, your complete water store.
Divine Intervention is online at yourfortdodge.com, on Twitter at JMike1400.
Well, that's right, back in the saddle again. I'm Mike Divine. Took a week's vacation. I just got here and bada bing. It's Joe Coleman on the phone. Joe Coleman, how are you? We're on the air. You're on my cell phone. Are you going to be on this afternoon, Joe?
Yes, I am.
All right, there it is, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Joe, but I'm talking with the pastor now on air, so I got to get onto that, okay?
Gotcha.
All right, man. I've been texting Joe all morning.
You're a popular guy.
Not, it's usually Joe or the bill collector. So there we go. Or some guy that thinks my warranty, car warranty is out. Car warranty, it's all
yeah, exactly. It's people that you don't really want to hear much from. So.
Pastor Austin Hill is here. Pastor Hill is with me, First Presbyterian Church, and I'm glad and honored once again that he has consented to be on air. This segment of the program brought to you by Blue Ribbon Pelham Waters at 612 South 32nd Street here in Fort Dodge. You may contact Blue Ribbon Pelham Waters by calling 576-6481. That's Blue Ribbon Pelham Waters. So go get yourself some. Gosh, I sound like one of those Southern Country Western disc jockeys. Anyway, we talked a little bit. The last time Pastor Hill and I talked was a couple of weeks ago. So that's a long time in the radio world.
Yeah. Can I have that amount of time?
Oh, God. I'll try to stay off the Biden thing, even though I'm really annoyed. Joe Biden. Eddie, 51st class reunion over the weekend there, Pastor.
Yeah. And we were talking a little bit about that. And it dawned on me, as we've been talking about the 20th anniversary of 9/11 this weekend, that I was a senior in high school when that happened.
You were a senior in high school?
Yeah. And so we're coming up on my own 20th anniversary or 20th would-be class reunion this coming year too. But I mean, it's pretty interesting to think about in some ways how life has changed in these last 20 years. And also in other ways how life really is kind of the same.
Julie Heckman is her name now, and she's kind of a girlfriend of mine. I guess she's a girlfriend. But anyway, her parents owned the Kershilla store. Now, that was a high-end women's clothing store, women's clothing and accessory store, back in Algona, Iowa, back in the 60s and 70s. It was still a thing. And I was always amazed that somebody could make a lot of money out of a high-end women's store in Algona, Iowa.
Yeah.
Little corn.
Yeah.
But Julie's father did. Anyway, they were the Kershilla store was in business for 125 years, continuous years. And at the time, it was a record for a family owning a retail store in downtown Iowa. Well, we went to the old building, which is part of a complex now. Julie wanted to see where her parents had worked to see if it was recognizable, which it was not. The real point of the story is that there were some young women in there, late 20s, early 30s, maybe 35 at the oldest. The oldest was about 35. And it was mentioned that this is where the Kashila store was all those years. None of them had any memory of it.
They just didn't even know what it was.
It was
Wow.
a big part of the retail and social life of our little town a long time ago. And it's been forgotten by most of the people there. I walked around the city, the small town I grew up in, and recognized nobody.
Yeah. Well, it really is a sobering thought when we recognize our own mortality and the transient nature of life, how quickly we are here and how quickly we are not.
Yeah, I went one of my classmates who I did not know, but just coincidentally, her last name was Divine too. She just lost her husband, was going through a very difficult time. And I was able to speak to her about the loss of my wife some 23 years ago. I hope I offered some comfort, but I kind of considered it my Christian duty. Anyway, here it is, all about me again. So let's talk with the pastor about some actual Christianity here, since that's kind of a thing that you know about, isn't it?
I try to.
All right, talk to us a little bit about the City of God by Aquinas.
Well, so this is great. So I do try to know a little bit about Christianity, but to be honest, I've never read The City of God.
Really?
So
I tried to.
So I know about it. I know Thomas Aquinas wrote it, and I know it was a little bit of his kind of understanding of the dynamic between church and state, and kind of his vision for what a Christian community would look like. But outside of that, I'm going to have to profess my own ignorance here. I was kind of hoping that you would know a little more. Yeah.
You want to do what?
I was kind of hoping that you would know a little more, and then I could give you my input on it. But
No. See, talk show hosts don't know a lot about the City of God. we got to bring in the ministers to talk about it.
Yeah, exactly.
So we can go back to the Sermon on the Mount. Or,
Sure. And right, even kind of like where we were going, just thinking about the frailty of human life, and thinking just about 9/11 and how that has impacted us. But yeah, it has kind of dawned on me, even just recently. So in our Presbyterian church, both my wife Sarah and I, between the two of us, we've had 4 funerals in the last maybe 10, 12 days, and we've got another person on hospice.
dear.
So there has been just a lot of death, and while it might not sound all that significant, we have a family pet. We have a cat that we've had for 13 years who's kind of dying at this point, and so the cat has been around longer than we've had our kids. So our kids have only ever known having this kitty. So there's been a lot of thought about death, and then even just going back to thinking about 9/11. And I think for many of us listening, I would assume that we all can look back on that day and we remember exactly where we were when we first heard about it, when we maybe saw things happening in real time on the news, depending on time zones. I was in California, so I think when the planes flew into the towers, it was pretty early. It was like 6, maybe 6:30 in the morning. I remember my dad waking me up and telling me a plane had flown into the World Trade Center. And I at first was thinking that this was some kind of small, like a Cessna or something. And then you turn on the TV and that horrific imagery that we all saw. And then as we watched as the second plane flew in. And to me, it's just such a still 20 years later, poignant moment that demonstrates how quickly life can change.
Yes, absolutely. It can, and that's one of the first things I taught my son, that life can turn on a dime.
And then
they'll tell you that.
and then all of society
Alcohol can change your life.
Yeah. And then on top of that, I mean, I'm thinking more recently for my children, it'll be, I think it was Tuesday, March 17th, that Kim Reynolds made the call last year to have people shelter in place or whatever it was. And for my kids, that will be a moment that they look back on when the world has changed. And people have already been talking a lot that there are changes that have happened with COVID that probably will never go back, to how it was before. Similar to 9/11, where kind of life as we knew it was different from that moment on. And and it can happen personally for us through a simple phone call, a call from a doctor or a family member, or it can happen on those more global national levels. And so for me, as I've been thinking about that this weekend, and even just as I was preaching on Sunday morning, about this idea of the importance of our words. I was filling in actually out at Friendship Haven for the chaplain out there. She had a health issue. And so I was preaching at Friendship Haven, and the passage that she was preaching from that I kind of inherited was this passage over in James chapter 3, that talks about the power of the tongue and how the tongue is such a small part of our body. It can have such incredible impact, in the same way that a small spark can have such an incredible impact, and a small spark can become a blaze that can consume an entire forest.
I'm glad you're bringing this up. Free speech advocates like myself don't believe in restrained speech.
Mm-hmm.
We do not believe that the church or state should restrain our speech. Now, there are certain exceptions, and I've made these concessions just grudgingly. You have no right to go to a person's house in the middle of the night and burn a cross on their front lawn.
Sure.
You don't have a right to, I mean, this is so old, it's almost a cliche. You don't have a right to yell fire in a crowded theater.
Yeah.
You don't have a right to keep someone in fear due to your speech.
Mm-hmm.
But you can take that to an extent where it's ridiculous. As a matter of fact, I was talking about this just a little bit ago. That comedy, and Billy Crystal and Bill Maher and other comedians have made note of this.
Yeah.
Comedy is dead. I was talking about being a disc jockey in the 1980s.
Uh-huh.
We would do gay jokes all the time.
Mm-hmm.
You know? All of a sudden now we're oppressors and this sort of thing. And we better allow transgender people to fully reveal themselves, or they'll shoot themselves, which I find is an unusual argument. Let me have my own way and stop talking bad about me, or I'll blow my own head off. What?
Well, I mean, and that's where we go back to. I think our culture, our society as a whole, is more anxious, is more fearful than previous generations.
And when you get that way, here comes the authoritarian impulse.
Well, so then that's where, going back to what you had said earlier, where we're talking about speech, and we do not have a right to put someone in a state of fear through our speech. But as we are collectively more anxious, more fearful, the threshold for what I say that creates fear in others comes far down. And that's where it becomes problematic, because we still want to uphold the ability to have freedom of speech, but we also don't want to have our speech send people into anxiety and fear and whatever.
Well, even the discussion of some things like transgender people or transgender people in our state, suddenly that becomes discriminatory or beyond the reach of common decency and dialogue.
Yeah.
What we have lost primarily, and George Will said this the other night on the Bill Maher show. See, liberals, I actually listen to other liberals. What we have lost in our country is the ability to persuade, or the desire to persuade, or the idea that persuasion is the ultimate goal and the ultimate tool. That is no longer the case.
Well, it's I think
screaming and hollering and
it's kind of a classic liberal ideal. Is that people should have the freedom to express their opinions, whatever they are. And
I do believe.
Yeah. And the irony is that to some extent, conservatives are now espousing what have been classically thought of as liberal ideals, because liberals
have abandoned liberal ideas.
Yeah.
Maher says that all the time.
Yeah.
Freedom of speech. Freedom to assemble.
Mhm.
Freedom to assemble if you're going to burn federal buildings is okay, apparently.
Yeah. And so what also I think is a very interesting change, going back to this idea of the importance of our speech, is our words now have a permanence that they didn't have a generation or two ago.
Okay, I'm going to put you to the test. What did we talk about 2 weeks ago?
We talked about the Sermon on the Mount.
Sermon on the Mount. No, that was a little over a week ago. I guess that was 2 weeks ago. All right. What did we say? What did we talk about 3 weeks ago?
Well, exactly.
So I don't think we have permanence going on.
Well,
I think we should. Everything I say should be burned into the consciousness.
Exactly, right.
Of people in Fort Dodge and the surrounding area.
You know, I sometimes feel that about my preaching too, and I wonder, should I do anything more than about 1 point on a Sunday morning? Because who's going to remember more than that 4 weeks from now anyway? And I think that's true, but everything is being recorded.
Everything is recorded.
And if someone wants to,
Is our speech permanent, or has a permanence, or does our speech? Can our speech be permanently held against us?
that's what I was getting at. Where if we say something that's harmful or whatever, that legacy will often outlive so much of the good that we do.
Well, I'm on record, I'm sure, with some of my older friends as telling a lot of Polish jokes back in the 70s.
Oh, I remember hearing all those back in the 90s.
Right. And Pope John Paul II came around and kind of killed the whole thing. But for a long time, it was Polish jokes.
Well, no, they still, I mean, they hung around for a while. To the point where I was a kid and in the 90s and 80s and still.
Did they? I didn't know that.
Yeah. I mean, I won't say them on the air here for reasons that we just said, but yeah.
Well, most of the ones I knew included pretty vulgar language.
Oh, well, I
only show.
Yeah. Mine were more like inventions, Polish inventions. But anyway,
Polish.
At the end of the day, though, I had this thought, even as I was preaching out at Friendship Haven, that our words sometimes will be the only part of us that truly lasts beyond our lives. And we can use our words for good or for ill. I think every one of us can look back to when we were a child and we can remember either the positive things that people said as they spoke into our lives or the negative things that went with us for years and years. And so there is an incredible power in the words that we have, that we use, and we can shape reality around us simply through our words.
Yes, we can. Is that a bad thing?
No, but I think it's a powerful thing. We need to be aware of that power we have and wield it well.
I don't know if I like that argument or not. Is that a Christian argument, do you believe, or?
Yeah, I think we are to use our words positively, and that doesn't mean we don't say difficult things.
If I say something like, we should go to war with the old Soviet Union, with Russia.
Sure.
Is that hate speech, or is that speech that should not be spoken? Or
no, I don't think anything like that. The only point I'm making is that I think maybe more interpersonally.
All right.
The words that I use.
How about, I think you look weird?
I think it would just depend on the context. If you knew the person and if they looked legitimately weird, I think you can say that appropriately.
I think it's inappropriate of you as a man to wear a dress. One of my classmates, by the way, is a transgender individual. He didn't come to the reunion.
Sure.
But is questioning a man wearing a dress and appearing as a female in public, or vice versa.
Yeah.
Is that speech that we should watch or be careful of?
I think there's a time and a place for anything. If you're going to say it in an abstract sense, like say on the radio, then I think you better be prepared for people giving an abstract critique or thought about it.
Do you know what talk radio is? You just described it.
Exactly. I know.
I'm going to give abstract critiques, and I'm prepared.
Exactly. Yeah. That's what you do best. But that's a very different scenario than being in relationship with someone.
That's true.
And being able to speak to them in a way that is appropriate to the relationship you have.
Yeah.
Now, so I think to get specific, I think you can have ideals that, like, for example, that don't believe that we should allow for, transgender. I don't know. I think you can have ideals about people who are transgender that go against the norm nowadays, and I don't think that's hate speech.
No, of course not. I could point out from statistics that African Americans as a group commit more crimes than other people in other categories, racial categories.
Mm-hmm.
Is that hate speech? Does that make, because if I say that makes African Americans, most of them, uncomfortable.
Sure.
But should it be precluded from public and private discussion?
No, not at all. And I think, statistics are...
Now, are you speaking as a Christian minister? Are you speaking as an American? Or...
I think I would say all of the above. And I'm sure my thoughts are being influenced because of who I am and where I come from.
Of course.
Yeah. But I think that's perfectly appropriate to say. However, what I would add as a caveat to that is that statistics can be used either out of context or they can be used as a bludgeon. I think it's one thing to use a statistic like that to start a positive conversation and say, okay, so what do we do about this? Or what might be the cause behind that statistic, that we look into. Whereas that same statistic could be used negatively to say, therefore, and then you can say some blanket, negative comment about, all African-American people or something like that. So I think the statistics themselves are neutral. It just depends on what one does with them. And I think we should be able to say them in conversation. I think that is a very Christian thing to do, to speak the truth, but in love, not to speak the truth as a jerk.
So I can't call somebody a butthead and a loser with love.
Well, at least not on the air.
No, at least not on But we'll continue this conversation if this is what Christ wants. Because I have, from my own personal experience, I mentioned a few times here on there just this last year that I got run out of a neighbor's house in tiny little old Algona, Iowa, because we were Catholics.
Yeah.
Keep away. My mother doesn't want you Catholics. I remember the viciousness in her voice, in the viciousness in the mother's voice. Just hatred.
Yeah. Contempt.
And I've seen black kids be called the N-word by adults. And the look on their face, and it's just disgraceful.
Yeah.
I wish I was big enough to beat the hell out of that guy.
Yeah.
But he died before I got big. So. All right. Pastor Hill is our guest.
Divine Intervention is online at yourfortdodge.com, on Twitter at JMike1400.
And this portion of the program, as every day, brought to you by Blue Ribbon Pelham Waters at 612 South 32nd Street here in Fort Dodge. You may contact Blue Ribbon Pelham Waters by calling 576-6481. That is, ladies and gentlemen, Blue Ribbon Pelham Waters. That's right. And in case I haven't mentioned it, this section of the program or segment of the program brought to you by Blue Ribbon Pelham Waters at 612 South 32nd Street here in Fort Dodge. You can contact Blue Ribbon Pelham Waters by calling 576-6041. Give them a call. They're a great company. Our guest is Pastor Austin Hill. I don't know what the hell we're talking about, but I'm going to get back to it anyway. Do you believe as a Christian that free speech is a positive thing?
Oh, certainly.
Do you believe God Almighty wants us to speak our mind?
Yes, I believe we are to love God with heart, soul, body, and mind.
Oh, yes, that we know.
Yeah.
But does God expect us or allow us to speak our minds on difficult subjects? Because it seems to me if Jesus hadn't done that, he would have never been crucified.
Certainly. I think Jesus challenged the norm. I mean, that you're right. That's from the very beginning of his ministry. People were getting frustrated, angered, angry enough to want to kill him because of how he was challenging the society of his day.
Yeah, that was exactly my point.
Yeah, I mean, with his speech.
So if there is something wrong, we should speak about it. And the Christ, and this is a big difference between advocates yelling their heads off in the street, the Christ spoke the truth.
Yeah. Now, what's hard is, I think, if anything, the generation I'm a part of, I am a millennial.
Congratulations. Way to go.
I'm going to change the world.
You're going to change the world. No, we did that. And the baby boomers did that. But on reflection, all we did is get in the way. You know, the real generation that changed the world was the World War II generation.
Yeah.
Changed our world for sure.
Certainly. Yeah. And
changed it for the best. And I would like to say Christian men were responsible for that mainly. And dare I say, Christian white men in great conflict with other Christian white men, which is a great, I thought about that many, many times. You know, there were reported incidents where German soldiers and U.S. soldiers prayed together.
Yeah.
Somewhat at a distance, but they prayed together. And were they praying to the same God? I mean, they had to have been.
Certainly.
They were Christian men.
Yeah.
But what the hell were they praying about? They were about to kill each other.
I think they were praying that maybe the war would end. They were praying that justice would prevail, only they had different views of what that justice was.
Yeah, killing a lot of Jews and Romanians or Gypsies was not. I've never been able to straighten that out of my head. How a Christian nation, and Lutheran ministers, frankly, spoke in favor of Hitler and anti-Semitism. Martin Luther was supposed to be deeply anti-Semitic. I've read a little bit about that.
Well, I do think, regarding speaking the truth, I do think when we look at our own Christian heritage in the United States, I think we can see an answer to that to some degree. While I love my country, I do think there are things we did as a country in its formation, like the way that we treated indigenous people was not Christian. I don't think it was good. Now, I think God...
I'm going to challenge you there just a moment.
Yeah.
A lot of Christian missionaries did a lot of ugly things.
I know.
With the belief that they were saving Indian children from pagan idolatry.
Yeah.
Or they were saving heathens of various minority groups.
Well, and I think what's so hard...
Were they really?
Well, like we stand on the shoulders of those decisions that people made before us. I mean, so much of what we have as a society, even just comforts and technology and things, has come at the expense of others. Or, looking at...
I do not judge our ancestors by contemporary standards.
Well, exactly.
That's a bunch of bull, and
Well,
it's taken full grip, too.
I mean, I think we do have to look at the past openly.
To learn from it.
Yes. And I'm not saying that I would have done any better or that I'm better than anyone, but I think we do have to, in the same way that we globally ask the Germans to confront their painful history and learn from it. I do think there are parts of our history that we could have and should have done better with. Now, we didn't, and I'm thankful for the heritage that I am a part of. But I think that is a part of speaking the truth, is to look at our past and say, we got to where we did, And God worked through people in situations, even in spite of brokenness and sin and hurt that was a part of it. And probably the low-hanging fruit, the easiest part of that is looking at our heritage with slavery, and even just the expansion of our country. I mean, really came at the expense of the indigenous people here. Now, do I think that means the solution is to eradicate our country and kind of give it back to Native Americans? No, I mean that ship has sailed. But I do think,
the University of Iowa is prepared to do that. They're already acknowledging that they're occupying native land. Well, good. Get the hell off.
Well, yeah. So then what are
Just
you gonna
get
do?
off.
Yeah.
Just get off. Just tear down your buildings and get off and go home, you liberal. Oh,
Yeah,
I love it.
So I guess that means you get rid of your tenure.
They have changed the name of Johnson County. I've often described Johnson County as the People's Republic of Johnson County. Well, apparently the original Johnson, who the county was named after, apparently owned slaves or something, some unpardonable sin, and so they changed the name of Johnson County to a female Johnson abolitionist or something, or suffragist or something like.
But
So
it's still a Johnson County.
It's still a
just
Johnson
different
County.
Johnson,
Liberals are too cute by half. I mean, they're just so damn cute,
Well, it's just hard because I want to be able to objectively look at the past and say, here are things that by our standards today we should not do, and we should look at that example as a negative example. But I also don't want to erase the things of our past. And I mean, that's actually why I love Scripture, because the Bible is filled with these pictures of people who, in spite of bad choices, in spite of their brokenness, God still did amazing things through them. God still worked through history through the Israelites, but the Israelites didn't always get it right. And we have kind of this full picture of them at their best and at their worst, and we don't erase that. We learn from it. So we get that from taking an honest look at the past.
I have always thought that history is Darwinian, that it was a tribal struggle for supremacy.
Yeah.
In our country, these descendants of Europeans, yes, white people, Caucasians, whatever you'd like to say, did win the battle of history. They did, and they built a wonderful country that we should all be proud of.
Well, yeah, and I think
I think the emphasis on the ugliness, and there certainly is ugliness, has began to warp the minds of our younger people.
Well, yeah, and I think, the ugly truth is that every civilization that exists today exists because it prevailed over and against another.
Of course they did. Of course they did. Let me remind everyone that the Khan family, Genghis Khan, Kublai Khan, in Central Asia right now, there has been a DNA study done in the last several years that 3% of the population, and we're talking Asia, has genetic ties to the Khan family. Now, there are reasons for that. The Khan family conquered smaller tribes, killed all the men, turned all the boys under 12 into eunuchs as slaves, and turned all the ugly women into slaves as well. And the attractive women, well, those women were seen as booty, frankly, and were used as sex slaves to members of the Khan family, or given away for 4 or 5 at a time to generals or high-ranking officers or people who pleased the Khans. As a result, today, and these things happened centuries and centuries ago, but still today, 3% of the population of Central Asia has the legacy of the Khans' supremacy. Now, if anybody ever should examine their conscience, it's probably the Khans, but I don't see them doing it.
Well, and I think that the Christian thing is that we all ought to do that as Christians, and hopefully we can all learn how to follow the example of Christ better moving forward. And I don't think the answer is to say, okay, because of the conquests that happened in the past, we're just going to tear down our society. Because, as I said, every current society exists because of its conquest of someone at some prior time. So I don't think you can avoid that. But what you can do moving forward is make sure you learn from those things and say, okay, here are some mistakes that we are not going to repeat.
You know who Lyman Beecher is?
I know his name.
Lyman Beecher was the father of Harriet Beecher Stowe.
Yeah. Mhm.
He was also a Presbyterian minister who was vigorously and vehemently anti-Catholic.
Mhm.
I grew up Catholic, of course, and you're a Presbyterian minister, so I suppose you want to make amends. I think if you fill my car with gas, that would be fine.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll forgive you for
Well, thank
all the suffering of my ancestors.
Yeah, from my ancestors.
Yeah, from your ancestors. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. Well, of course, a tank of gas under Biden is probably $120. I'm rolling.
Yeah.
I'm rolling.
Well, so I think though with this issue of speech and with speaking the truth and being honest, I think it is important that we are honest about ourselves, about our past, about the good and the bad. I think that's the only way we can move forward together. Now that I don't think that means we move into reparations and things like that.
Mm.
But
How do we cleanse our soul then, Moses?
well, I think to some degree we can confess our part in being a part of a lineage that has done things wrong. And that's not to say that Americans are worse than anyone else or anything like that, because I think every group of people has things in their past that they can confess and try to move on from. And to me, that seems like a very scriptural thing. If you look at the Old Testament, you see that the community of God's people, they engaged their faithfulness to God in communal ways, that one person's actions had an impact on everyone. And so you would see the community being involved in communal confession, even if it was one person or an ancestor who had sinned. I think you can see that even in the New Testament with Ananias and Sapphira in Acts chapter 5. There were people who were not giving what they should, and in this strange passage in the New Testament, God strikes them dead because they were not being honest as they were giving to the church. But I see that as another example of how the actions of two individuals were impacting the larger body of Christians.
But surely Christians can go to bed at night, and before they go to sleep, they can think through their day and through their lives and through history. And they must be able to think of something they did right. And I'm speaking primarily about Caucasian Christians now, because they seem to be certainly condemned more for their sexism and racism.
Sure, yeah. It is an interesting thing. I do think white evangelicals, of which that's a very big part of who I am and have been, we tend to think of issues more on an individual basis as opposed to a collective basis.
Yeah, that's a good thing, isn't it?
Well,
That's the American in us. We don't believe in collectivism.
but that is an issue where I think scripturally, I don't know necessarily how individualist Jesus was. I think in some ways, yes.
Jesus was a commie? That's it.
In some ways, I think yes, but I think there are other ways that we let our American individualism maybe supersede our identity in Christ, where no one can tell me what to do, except for in the New Testament, Paul told people in the community of Christ what to do all the time, and reminded them of their greater responsibility to the larger group. Now, we hear that and think, oh, well, that just sounds communist or socialist. But
kind of.
Yeah. And so I think we do have to hold that in tension, that what we say and do as individuals matters, certainly, but we also have to recognize that there's more to life than just me and my own prosperity, my own flourishing.
And what would that be? Because men weren't taught like that. We were responsible for our families. We were responsible for their safety, for their security, for certainly for the life's essentials.
Yeah.
And there was a great inspiration, men of a different generation, not these guys who wear pink shoes now, but there was a great belief that it was by the command of God Almighty that we should be the head of our families, and that we should be responsible for, again, the safety and security of our family.
Yeah, well, I mean, headship under that model, in Ephesians 5, being the head, is rooted in service. To be a leader is to be a servant. To be the best one at serving other people. And actually, I mean, I go back to that famous line of JFK: "Ask not what my country can do for me, but what I can do for my country." It's a paraphrase, but so I do think there even, I mean, at that point, and certainly people who served in any war in the 20th century know of the incredible responsibility they had to serve the greater good. And yes, they were ultimately serving their individual family as they were laying down their lives, but they also were serving their country.
Yes.
They were serving a free society, and they were willing to die because of it. I think to some degree, today, we've lost that.
We've totally lost it.
And don't get me wrong, like take the mask mandates. I don't think necessarily we need to mandate masks. But I also think if we had people in previous generations who were willing to go to war on behalf of those who needed to be defended, the least we could do is maybe put on a mask. And we are so individualist. It's like no one can tell me what to do, and it's like fine, I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm not going to have the government mandate things like that. But by gosh, maybe we can sacrifice a little bit for someone other than ourselves.
I believe that. I believe in Christian service. I do, but I believe ultimately we answer to God as an individual.
Yeah.
We, not you. I don't answer for your good things. I
Yeah.
don't answer for your bad things. I don't answer for your life.
Yeah.
I answer for mine.
Yeah.
And that to me is a higher purpose than anything that Joe
Well,
Biden
yeah.
or Donald Trump ever had
yeah.
to say.
But going back to the Second World War, I look at the draft, and yes, we believed that you needed to stand up and defend your fellow countrymen, and that was a sacred duty. But that also was a government mandated duty.
Well, it was government mandated duty, but it was done by class. Believe me, Lyndon Johnson knew that if he started drafting middle class kids out of college, if it was truly a fair and equitable draft, that he'd have a problem on his hands with people that he wanted to vote Democratic.
Well, sure, yeah.
The affluent middle class, the educated affluent middle class. Yeah. So he made sure that there was a device that sent poor kids to war, and that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
By the way, there has been a battle between the poor kids who went and the college-educated kids that didn't ever since. The Clintons were the ultimate embodiment of post-World War baby boom privilege.
Well, and I just heard even
and everybody wondered why we wanted to throw them out.
I heard earlier today a tragic story of someone who had their child baptized in the early 70s at our church, and they were in their dress blues at baptism.
Sure.
And someone said a horrendous, offensive comment to that person because they were a service.
Happened all the time. I was called a baby boomer by these long hairs coming off the camp in California.
Yeah.
I thought to myself, I'm 19 years old. I'm from Mount Dona, Iowa. How can I be a baby killer, you bozos?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I, really, despite my flirtations with liberal thought, really a liberal in my mind is a Christian in the first place. But I have never been able to reconcile myself with those smug creeps that protested the war in Vietnam, who didn't serve, and people like Bill Clinton, who made up a big story about being horrified at the racist war in Vietnam. He wasn't horrified. He didn't want to go. Rush Limbaugh said the same thing. Dick Cheney had other priorities than go serve his own country that he was willing to send my son to.
Yeah.
So, it's really not about race or gender. It's about class. It always has been to me. And we never think in the United States of America that we have social and economic class, but we do.
Yeah, and they might be a little bit more permeable than maybe other societies. But
I'll tell you, not that many people. There's always a big story when somebody comes out of the ashes and gets rich, But there's not that many people that do that. There's not that many people. At least capitalism offers a way, or it used to, but it's more Darwinian now than ever.
Yeah, certainly. And I think so the part of this, to make a full circle as we wrap up here, thinking about our speech, I do believe we have Christian responsibility to speak the truth, but to do it in love. And that goes back to, the hypotheticals and the abstracts. And I think on all of these issues, the hot button issues and whatever else, the biggest thing is having these conversations with people we are actually in relationship with. And that tailors your response far more than having kind of these public grandstanding opinions, on Twitter and everything else. Where
Twitter. Those places kill me. I mean, there's all kinds of fake pages out there talking all kinds of ridiculous stuff.
Yeah.
You know? But they kick Trump off. I don't get it. I don't get it.
We'll save that for another day.
We'll save that for another day. That's right. Anyway, what can we say as we close?
Well, I would challenge people with what I said earlier. Your words have permanence. And yes, there's a lot of noise and whatever else, but you will be remembered by your words. And so think carefully about those words you use. Are you building people up or are you tearing people down?
You'll be also judged by what you do.
Yes.
Because there's some Supreme Court decisions out there that aren't even based on the Constitution. They're based on a powerful belief or ideology of the judges themselves.
Sure.
Which is a sin in my formerly Catholic mind. Anyway, by the way, is there sin in the Presbyterian Church, or do you just chill?
Yeah, well, of course there's sin. We have a confession of sin every Sunday.
Really?
Yeah, we confess.
But that's communal, right?
Well, and
nobody comes and whispers in
well,
your
not
ears.
to me, no, but we have a written prayer that we all say together and a time for silent confession.
All right, good enough. Pastor Austin Hill has been here. Thank you, Pastor,
My
as
pleasure.
always. This is AM 1400 KBFD, the voice of Fort Dodge. This segment brought to you by Blue Ribbon Pelham Waters at 612 South 32nd Street, Fort Dodge. You may contact Blue Ribbon Pelham Waters by calling 576-6481. That's Blue Ribbon Pelham Waters. Sam Clovis coming up after the news. Yeah, it's 3 o'clock at AM 1400. Where you go?
All right, that was a good one.
Yes, it was.
Joey Ryman, the voice of the U.S.